Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Indulge me as I ask you about the charges you have made, the bills you have paid, and the purchases you have Venmoed over the last few weeks. How have you spent your money? Next, think about where you've been, what you've done, and who you've been with over the last few weeks. How have you spent your time? Finally, what are the most important values in your life? What are the values that you say guide your life, that give your life meaning and purpose? I believe that God is somewhere in the midst of these three things. So are your emperors. The responses that you've had to my questions reveal their presence and your relationships with them. I have no judgments about whatever your responses might be, and I'm not suggesting that there are particular answers that are either right or wrong. I wonder, though, does your spending of time and money reflect your values? Are you living the life you say that you want to live? Is your life one of authenticity and integrity? Is there coherence and wholeness in your life? I think that's what Jesus is getting at in today's gospel when he says, "Give therefore to the emperor or Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." It sounds simple enough. It sounds like we should be able to just take a piece of paper, divide it into two columns, one for God and one for our Caesars, and then start making our list. And this is often how this text gets interpreted. We hear Jesus saying that there's God stuff, and then there's Caesar stuff. And then we try to divide our life and our world between church and state, religion and politics, sacred and secular, saved and damned, tithe and taxes, spirit and matter, body and mind, heaven and earth, humanity and divinity, as if they were completely separate and unrelated and have nothing to do with each other. The duality is at the heart of the question the Pharisees and Herodians asked Jesus. The Herodians weren't particularly religious. They were political leaders who supported the Roman authority given to Herod over Israel. An alliance between the Pharisees and the Herodians was unheard of. They only worked together because of their mutual fear and dislike of Jesus and his growing influence on people. So they come to Jesus with a stick-to-him question. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? They want to know whose side Jesus is on, the emperor's or God's. This coin required a tax to be paid to the Romans. And it wasn't just any tax. First century Jews had to pay their share of taxes just as we do. But the tax that required payment with a denarii was the imperial tribute, or census tax, that had been instituted about the time of Jesus' birth. Yep, it was the tax that Jews paid to support the Roman occupation of Israel. The Jews had to pay 1 denarii a year to finance their own oppression. The question they asked Jesus was a trap, and they were the ones that were caught. Because when we live or think dualistically, I believe we only entrap ourselves in little compartments. We have our prayer life and our religious life, our family life, our political life, our love life, our work life, our economic life. And when they're separated from one another in tiny little compartments, we exclude God from a large part of our lives and our world. And I wonder whether or not this may be part of the reason so many of us distrust religion or find it to be irrelevant. Dualistic and simplified answers are no match for the complexities in our lives. It is not how Jesus lived, as was demonstrated in this gospel. Jesus is not asking us to divide our loyalties or compartmentalize our lives. Instead, he's holding before us the reality of God and the reality of our own emperors that live inside of us. Both are real. Both are part of our lives and our world. Jesus is asking us to step into and live into the tension of these two realities. That's what he did. That's where he lived. To stand in that place is to stand with Jesus. That's where life gets real. It's neither a comfortable or an easy place to be. And there are no easy answers. This is what I mean. Begin with your checkbook, your calendar, and your values. What would go in God's column? What would go in Caesar's column? Who is God in our life? And who are the Caesars? Now, you may think that I'm asking you to reflect on God's image by increasing your pledge commitment to service in the church. And as much as I would love to see your deepening faith expressed in these ways, I'm not asking any of those things. I'm simply asking you to remember that you are marvelously made in the image of God, and you are meant to shine to the world and the people that you encounter every day, whether you like them or not, whether you approve their actions or their political beliefs or their theological opinions, to see that they also bear the image of God. Can we be conscious about how someone is looking to us often when we least expect it? To find that image and see it as a reminder that God adores each of us. Our identity as beloved children of God, bearing God's own image, shapes our behavior and and our thinking. It urges us to become the people that Jesus calls us to be, centered on Christ, offering Christ, doing things through Christ to the glory of God. The struggle, the tension of living with and between God and my emperors continually pushes me inward to examine my life, to reflect on who I am and what I do, and whose image and title I bear. I wonder if this is Jesus' intention in the gospel today. Because maybe when we recognize and accept and struggle with unsolvable problems, maybe that's when we really begin to follow Jesus. We stop searching for black and white and begin seeking life. And that's when and where the church has something to say. Because faith makes a difference. Because faith can change lives. Your life. My life. Last week I was in a conversation with a clergy person in the Gloucester area about how sometimes I struggle with my prayer life and what I often do to re-engage myself with God. Her reaction at first was concern for me, and I shared that if I don't struggle and if I don't wrestle, I also avoid resting with God. When I avoid struggles, it sidelines the wrestling. And then it often sidelines welcoming God's presence in my life. Likewise, to simply divide life between empire and God, it avoids the struggle. And it makes me want to have a fake resting place. But when I take my unsolvable problems to God, this often leads me to a sweet and spongy intimacy with God. Then I can stop searching for black and white answers and begin seeking life. And this is my hope for you and for me as we continue to come to know each other at St. John's. Because our shared faith life will welcome God's presence. Others may feel God resting among us if they are not looking for simplistic answers to the questions and problems in their lives. So I look forward about your wrestling with God and sharing my own wrestlings as I begin my second month of serving you. Together, I hope we will seek a sweet intimacy with God that will change all of our lives and the lives around us. In the name of God.